The first thing I remember is glass screaming. Not shattering, screaming, a high panicked sound as the car spun and the world tilted sideways. My seatbelt bit into my collarbone. The headlights caught nothing but trees and then sky and then asphalt again. Over and over, like I was being shaken by something enormous and angry. Then silence. Not peace. Not relief. Just the kind of silence that presses on your ears so hard you're sure you've gone deaf. Smoke crawled in through the vents. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't tell if they were mine. Somewhere nearby, metal ticked as it cooled, each click a countdown I didn't understand yet. I tasted blood and copper and fear. I remember thinking, very clearly, this is how people disappear. This is where it happens. I fumbled for the door handle. It wouldn't move. That's when the shadow fell across the windshield. A man's face appeared through the cracked glass, distorted and unreal, like I was underwater. He knocked once, firm and calm, as if this were a door he'd opened 1,000 times before. "Hey," he said. His voice cut through the smoke. Steady. Grounded. Wrongly calm. "You're alive. Stay with me." I tried to speak. Nothing came out. He was already pulling at the door, bracing his foot against the frame. I remember noticing his hands. No hesitation, no tremor. The door gave way with a groan, and cold night air rushed in, sharp as a slap. "There we go," he murmured, close now. "Too close. I've got you." His arm slid behind my shoulders. I felt myself being lifted, the world tilting again, but this time there was no spinning, just his chest, solid and warm, and the smell of rain and something faintly metallic, like coins. "Easy," he said, as if I were something fragile. As if he'd practiced the word. "You're safe now." Safe. I clung to that word because everything else was slipping. The road was empty. No other cars. No headlights. No witnesses. Just trees pressing in on both sides, black and patient. As he carried me away from the wreck, my head lolled against his shoulder, and I caught a glimpse of his face in profile. Focused. Almost gentle. And beneath the shock, beneath the pain, a thin, traitorous thought slid into place. He didn't find me. He was already here. I came back to myself in fragments. A ceiling with a long crack running through it like a fault line. The rhythmic hiss of oxygen. The ache arrived before the memories did. Deep, blooming pain in my ribs, my neck, my head. When I tried to move, my body refused, as if it had quietly decided not to belong to me anymore. "You're awake." His voice. Immediately. As if he'd been waiting for the exact second my eyes opened. I turned my head. Too fast, a mistake, and the room lurched. He stood beside the bed, one hand resting on the metal rail, the other holding a paper cup of water. Hospital bracelet on his wrist. Visitor's badge clipped to his jacket. Concerned stranger written all over him in neat, believable lines. "Careful," he said softly. "You took a pretty bad hit." My throat felt like sandpaper. "Where?" "County Hospital. Just outside the city." He smiled, small and reassuring. "You scared me back there." "You." The word snagged. I searched his face, trying to place him. The roadside. The smoke. His arms. "You pulled me out," I said. "Yeah." He shrugged, like it wasn't the single most important thing that had happened in either of our lives. Right place, right time. I didn't believe in that kind of luck, but I nodded anyway. It was easier than thinking too hard. Thinking made the room pulse. "I'm Daniel," he added after a beat. "I stayed to make sure you were okay. Doctors said you might not wake up for a while." "How long?" I asked. "Almost a day." "A day. Lost. Just gone." I swallowed, panic fluttering in my chest. My phone, my husband. "Hey." Daniel lifted his hands, placating. "It's okay. I called the number labeled home. He knows where you are." That word, husband, landed heavily between us. Relief and shame tangled together in my gut. "Thank you." "Of course," he said. "No hesitation. No edge. Anyone would." But that wasn't true, and we both knew it. Silence settled. Not awkward, intentional. He pulled the chair closer and sat, elbows on his knees, eyes never leaving my face. I became acutely aware of how exposed I was in the thin hospital gown. How dependent. "You don't remember the accident?" he asked. Not all of it. That's normal. His tone shifted, careful now. They said it might come back in pieces. Or not at all. Something in the way he said it made my skin prickle. Might not at all sounded less like reassurance and more like a suggestion. A nurse came in then, brisk and efficient, breaking the spell. Daniel stepped back immediately, giving her space, playing the role perfectly. Helpful. Polite. Disposable. But he didn't leave. When she was gone and the room settled again, he leaned in just slightly and lowered his voice. I'm really glad you're alive, he said. There it was. The thread. Gratitude. Warm and heavy, wrapping around my ribs tighter than the pain. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't there, I whispered. His eyes softened. Ido. That night, after my husband came and went in a blur of tears and apologies and promises to never complain about my late drives again, Daniel was still there, sitting in the same chair, as if he belonged to the room more than anyone else. You should go home, I told him, suddenly aware of the hour. He smiled, slow this time. Intimate. I will. I just wanted to make sure you weren't alone. I watched him leave, the door clicking shut behind him. Only then did it occur to me how strange it was that he'd known exactly where to find me on that road. Only then did I realize I'd never asked him why he'd been there at all. Recovery rewrote time. Days stretched, then collapsed. Painkillers blurred the edges of everything, turning hours into soft, colorless smears. My husband came every evening after work, sat stiffly in the chair Daniel had claimed first, kissed my forehead like he was checking off a task. He told me how scared he'd been. How guilty. How he kept replaying the phone call in his head. I should have told you not to drive that road, he said more than once. I didn't tell him I barely remembered the road at all. Daniel came too. Not every day, just often enough to feel intentional. He always arrived in the late afternoon, when the light slanted through the blinds and the ward grew quieter. He never stayed long when my husband was there. Just a nod, a polite smile, a man careful not to overstep. But when we were alone, the air changed. How are you really? He asked one day, pulling the chair close again. I hesitated. Then inexplicably tears filled my eyes. I feel wrong, I said. Like something important is missing. He nodded slowly like he understood. That happens after trauma. Your mind protects itself. From what? Daniel didn't answer right away. He watched my hands instead, fidgeting with the blanket. From things it's not ready to face. The way he said it made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask more. I didn't. When I was discharged, he was there, holding a coffee for my husband, carrying my overnight bag without being asked, standing just a little too close as we waited for the elevator. Text me when you get home, he said quietly. I blinked. You gave me your number? He smiled. Check your phone. I did. His name was already there, neatly saved. Daniel R. I should have been bothered. Instead, I felt oddly relieved. At home, the house felt unfamiliar, like a place I'd seen in photos but never lived in. I moved carefully, every step a reminder of my body's fragility. My husband hovered, anxious and clumsy, offering help I didn't want, asking questions I couldn't answer. That first night, I couldn't sleep. At 2:14 a.m., my phone vibrated. Did you make it home okay? I stared at the screen, my heart thudding. After a long moment, I typed back. Yes. Thank you for everything. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Anytime. If you need anything. Even if it feels stupid. I lay there in the dark, the glow of the screen lighting my ceiling's cracks, and typed words I hadn't planned to say. I keep thinking about the accident. This time his reply took longer. Me too. That was the beginning. We didn't talk about desire. Not then. We talked about fear. About the way the night pressed in when sleep wouldn't come. About how silence could feel louder than pain. He listened in a way my husband never had. Without trying to fix, without deflecting. You're allowed to be shaken, Daniel wrote one night. What happened to you was violent. The word sent a shiver through me. Sometimes he asked gentle questions about what I remembered. Sometimes he steered me away from the subject entirely. The control was subtle, almost kind. One afternoon, while my husband was at work, Daniel stopped by just to check in. He stood in the doorway, uncertain, until I invited him in. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. The distance felt deliberate. Charged. I shouldn't stay long, he said. You don't have to, I replied. Our eyes met. Something shifted. Quiet, irreversible. He reached out, hesitated, then let his hand rest over mine. Warm. Steady. I didn't pull away. This doesn't mean anything has to happen, he murmured. I just don't want you to feel alone. I nodded, throat tight, telling myself it was comfort, gratitude, trauma bonding. But when he finally left, my hand still tingled where his had been. That night, lying beside my sleeping husband, I realized something that terrified me more than the crash ever had. The safest I'd felt since the accident was in the presence of the man who'd pulled me from it. And I had no idea how deep that truth would cut. Affairs don't announce themselves. They slip in quietly, disguised as necessity. Daniel became part of my routine without ever asking permission. A message in the morning. How did you sleep? A check-in before dinner. Pain bad today? He never pushed. Never demanded. He positioned himself as something I already needed. When my husband forgot my follow-up appointment, Daniel remembered. When I mentioned, offhand, that the sound of screeching brakes on TV made my chest lock up, Daniel stopped watching anything with cars in it. Didn't even notice I was doing it, he said, smiling. He noticed everything. The first time I realized I was hiding him, it startled me. My husband walked into the kitchen while I was texting. I tilted the phone away without thinking, my pulse jumping like I'd been caught stealing. Nothing incriminating on the screen. Just Daniel asking if I'd eaten. Still, guilt crawled up my spine. That night, my husband reached for me in bed. His hand was tentative, unsure of my still healing body. I stiffened without meaning to. It's okay, he whispered. We don't have to. Relief flooded me, immediately followed by something colder. Disappointment. I lay awake afterward, staring at the ceiling, and sent a message I shouldn't have. Sometimes I feel like I don't fit back into my life. Daniel's reply came slower than usual. That makes sense, he wrote. Your life broke. You're the only one who feels the cracks. The words slid under my skin. He was right. My husband wanted things to go back to normal. Daniel never used that word. A week later, Daniel suggested we go for a walk. Just around the block, he said, standing on my porch, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. Fresh air helps with recovery. I hesitated. My husband doesn't have to know, Daniel said gently. Not because it's wrong. Just because it's yours. That was the first time he framed secrecy as ownership. Outside, the world felt too loud, too sharp. Cars passed and my heart spiked every time. Daniel noticed immediately, stepping closer, his presence a shield. You're okay, he murmured. I've got you. Those words again. When a car backfired somewhere down the street, I flinched hard enough to stumble. His hand caught my elbow, then didn't let go. I should have pulled away. Instead, I leaned in. The kiss wasn't sudden. That's what made it worse. It unfolded slowly, as if we were both waiting for the other to stop it. His mouth was warm, careful, devastatingly patient. When we finally broke apart, I was shaking. I'm sorry, he whispered. Daniel rested his forehead against mine. Don't apologize for feeling alive. That night, the guilt came crashing down. I cried in the shower, scrubbing my skin like I could wash the moment away. I promised myself it would never happen again. 2 days later, I invited him inside. From then on, everything existed in fragments. Stolen hours, muted phones, locked doors. Daniel never stayed long. He said it was safer that way. He said we had to be careful. Careful felt like control, but I didn't recognize it yet. He asked more questions about the accident now. Specific ones. Did you notice any other cars before you lost control? Were you distracted? Do you remember braking? Every time I struggled to answer, he nodded approvingly. See, your mind's protecting you. Sometimes he'd go quiet after these conversations, his jaw tight, his gaze distant. When I asked what he was thinking, he always said the same thing. I hate that someone did this to you. Someone. One afternoon, while we lay tangled on the couch, he traced the faint bruise still lingering on my wrist. You know, he said casually. If things had gone a little differently that night, you might not be here. A chill ran through me. Why would you say that? He looked at me. I soft but intent. Because it makes every moment matter. Later, alone, I replayed his words again and again. Not if things had gone differently. If someone had wanted them to. The thought lodged in my mind, unwelcome and sharp. And beneath it, barely audible but growing louder by the day, was another realization. Daniel wasn't just part of my recovery anymore. He was becoming the lens through which I understood everything that had happened to me. And I was starting to see exactly what he wanted me to see. The first crack appeared as a kindness. I was sorting through paperwork one afternoon. Insurance forms, medical bills, documents I'd been too overwhelmed to touch, when Daniel leaned over my shoulder and said, "You know, you don't have to do all this alone." My husband was at work. The house was quiet except for the tick of the kitchen clock. "I'm fine," I said automatically. Daniel smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I didn't say you weren't." He reached for one of the forms, scanning it quickly. Too quickly. "This accident report," he said. "Have you read it carefully?" "I don't really want to," I admitted. "It makes my chest tight." He nodded, like that was the correct answer. "Of course. That's exactly why it's interesting." That word again. He pointed to a paragraph. "See, they ruled it a loss of control incident. No third-party involvement." "So?" I asked. "So," he said gently, "that means if anything else did happen, no one's looking for it." A chill crept up my arms. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he replied carefully, "that sometimes the simplest explanation is the one authorities choose when they don't want to dig." Why wouldn't they want to dig? He met my eyes. Help them. Because digging costs time, money, and sometimes it reveals things people don't want revealed. The room felt smaller. The walls closer. That night, I asked my husband about the report. He looked surprised. Then uneasy. "They told me it was straightforward. You swerved, hit the shoulder. No other vehicles involved." "Did they say why I swerved?" He hesitated. "Just a fraction of a second. But I saw it." "They thought maybe you were distracted," he said. "Your phone maybe." My stomach dropped. "I wasn't on my phone." "I know," he said quickly. "I told them that." But his eyes slid away from mine. Later, alone, I stared at my phone until my vision blurred. No messages sent. No calls. Nothing that explained the sudden, violent loss of control. I texted Daniel. "They think it was my fault." His reply came immediately. "That's what they want you to think." Something twisted inside me. "Ooh." I typed, then deleted it. Rewrote it. Why would anyone want that? There was a pause this time. Longer than usual. "Because if you blame yourself," he finally wrote, "you won't ask the right questions." Sleep abandoned me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the road again. Not clearly, but as impressions. Headlights that didn't make sense. A shape at the edge of the shoulder. The feeling, not of losing control, but of being pushed. In the morning, Daniel arrived unannounced. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said, stepping inside before I could answer. "I didn't," I admitted. "I keep thinking, what if someone ran me off the road?" His face darkened, not with surprise, but with something like confirmation. "That's not crazy." The word landed hard. Validating. Dangerous. "Daniel," I said slowly, "you were there that night." "Yes." "Did you see anything?" He hesitated. "Just long enough." "I saw your car veer," he said. Suddenly. Like you reacted to something. "To what?" I pressed. "I don't know," he said softly. It was dark. The answer should have satisfied me. Instead, it made my heart race. Because if he'd seen my car veer suddenly, that meant he'd been watching before it happened. "I don't like this," I whispered. "I feel like I'm losing my grip." Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're not losing it. You're waking up." He placed his hands on my shoulders, grounding, intimate. "Everyone else wants this to be over. I don't. I want you to know the truth." "What if the truth hurts?" I asked. His grip tightened slightly. "It already does. You're just finally noticing." That afternoon, I tried to act normal. I made dinner. I laughed at the right moments. But I watched my husband with new eyes. How carefully he avoided talking about the accident. How quickly he changed the subject when I mentioned the road. When he kissed me goodbye before bed, I felt nothing. Later, I lay awake, replaying Daniel's words. If you blame yourself, you won't ask the right questions. A new thought crept in, slow and poisonous. What if the accident hadn't just changed my life? What if it had exposed a lie I'd been living inside all along? And what if the man who saved me wasn't the answer, but the key? Paranoia doesn't arrive screaming. It whispers. After that night, I started noticing patterns I couldn't unsee. My husband's phone face down on the counter, always. The way he stepped outside to take calls, voice low, back turned. How he flinched when Daniel's name came up. Then masked it with a smile that arrived a second too late. Still talking to your rescuer? He asked once casually. Too casually. He helped me, I said. I know. A pause. Just seems intense. The word stung. Because intensity was the only thing that made sense anymore. Daniel leaned into it. You feel them pulling away, don't you? He said one afternoon, as we sat in his car a block away from my house. He never parked in front anymore. That's what happens when people have something to hide. Who? I asked. He didn't answer directly. Trauma creates clarity, he said instead. It strips away the polite lies. He began pointing things out gently. Coincidences. Inconsistencies. Did you know your husband took that road a lot before the accident? Funny how no one else stopped that night. Strange that the report was closed so quickly. Each comment was small, reasonable, but together, they formed a shape I couldn't ignore. I checked phone records when my husband was in the shower. Numbers I didn't recognize. Repeated calls late at night, deleted messages. When I asked him about it, he laughed too loudly. Work, he said. You're reading into things. Maybe I was. But Daniel never told me I was imagining it. Instead, he warned me. Be careful what you confront, he said. People get desperate when their stories start to fall apart. Are you saying he could hurt me? I whispered. Daniel looked at me for a long time before answering. I'm saying you were already hurt once. Sleep became impossible. Every sound in the house felt amplified. Every shadow stretched too long. I started locking doors I'd never locked before. Started flinching when my husband touched me unexpectedly. One night, I woke to the glow of his phone in the dark. What are you doing? I asked, heart racing. Nothing, he said quickly, turning the screen away. Go back to sleep. I didn't. The next day, I told Daniel everything. He listened, jaw tight, eyes cold. I was afraid of this, he said. Afraid of what? That you were never meant to walk away from that road. The words chilled me. What does that mean? It means, he said carefully, that some accidents aren't accidents. They're warnings. Or tests. My stomach twisted. Who would do that? Daniel reached out, gripping my hand. Someone who thought they knew you. Someone who underestimated how strong you are. I pulled my hand back. You're scaring me. I'm trying to protect you, he replied. If I wanted to scare you, I'd tell you everything I know. That night, I searched my husband's laptop while he slept. I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I was looking for permission to believe. What I found wasn't a message or a confession. It was a calendar entry months old, easy to miss. AD logistics confirmed. No context. No explanation. But the initials burned into my mind. AD. Daniel. I closed the laptop slowly, my hands numb. In the darkness, my husband shifted beside me, murmuring something unintelligible. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, one thought echoing louder than all the others. If they knew each other, then nothing about that night was random. And if Daniel had been guiding me toward the truth, why did it feel like I was being led somewhere I couldn't come back from? The truth doesn't arrive whole. It leaks. After the calendar entry, I stopped sleeping in my own bed. I told my husband it was the pain, that lying flat made my ribs ache. He accepted it too quickly, grateful for an excuse that didn't require conversation. I lay on the couch instead, staring at the darkened hallway, listening to the house breathe around me. Every sound became evidence. Footsteps I couldn't place. The faint buzz of his phone at night. The way he smelled like unfamiliar soap once, sharp citrusy wrong. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Daniel told me not to. Once you let them know you're aware, he said, you lose whatever advantage you have. Advantage? I echoed. He smiled thinly. Information. We met in a parking garage downtown, the kind with flickering lights and blind corners. I hated it. He knew that. You said you knew things, I told him, my voice bouncing off concrete. About my husband. Daniel leaned against his car, arms crossed. Calm. Contained. I know he lies well. That's not enough. He studied my face, then sighed. Okay. Fragment then. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. Two men, backs turned to the camera, sitting close together at a bar. One had a familiar slope to his shoulders. A familiar watch on his wrist. My stomach dropped. That could be anyone. Daniel zoomed in. The reflection in the mirror behind the bar caught my husband's face. Unmistakable. Laughing. Relaxed. Intimate in a way I hadn't seen in years. When was this taken? I asked, my hands shaking. Before the accident, Daniel said. A few weeks. Who took it? I did. The garage seemed to tilt. Why were you following him? I wasn't, Daniel replied. I was with him. The words landed like a physical blow. With him, I repeated. As in, yes. The silence that followed was total. Absolute. I didn't know he was married at first, Daniel continued. His voice steady, practiced. When I found out, I tried to end it. He begged. Promised it was complicated. That you wouldn't be hurt. I laughed, a short broken sound. You expect me to believe this? I expect you to recognize it, he said quietly. Because some part of you already does. My mind raced, stitching memories together into something grotesque and coherent. The distance. The secrets. The way my husband avoided Daniel's name like it burned. And the accident? I whispered. You said you were afraid of this. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. I was afraid you'd start asking questions before you were ready. For what? I demanded. For how far he'd go to keep you from finding out. The implication crawled under my skin. You think he tried to kill me, I said. Daniel didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was low. I think he panicked. The word echoed. Panicked people did stupid things. Dangerous things. Why tell me now? I asked. Why not before? Because before, he said, stepping closer. You loved him more than you trusted yourself. And now you're listening. I drove home in a fog. Every red light felt like an accusation. When I pulled into the driveway, my husband's car was already there. Inside, he was in the kitchen, humming softly as he chopped vegetables. Domestic. Ordinary. The sight of him made my skin crawl. Hey, he said, smiling. You're late. Traffic. I lied. He kissed my cheek. I resisted the urge to flinch. That night, I dreamed of the road again. But this time, there was no confusion. Just clarity. Headlights behind me, too close. The sense of being herded, not chased. I woke with my heart pounding and one certainty burning through me. My husband and Daniel were connected long before I ever knew either of them. And one of them was lying to me now. The worst part wasn't knowing that. It was realizing I no longer knew which one I was more afraid of. I stopped trusting my own memories. They had betrayed me once already. Daniel suggested we meet somewhere neutral, somewhere safe. A cafe near the river, all glass and pale wood, too public for shouting, too open for violence. I told my husband I was meeting a physical therapist. He didn't question it. That, more than anything, scared me. Daniel arrived early. Of course he did. He watched me through the window as I approached, his reflection layered over mine in the glass. When I sat down, he didn't smile. You're pulling away, he said. I'm thinking, I replied. There's a difference. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Good. Then let's be honest. My heart thudded. You already said you were. Not completely, he admitted. Because honesty is dangerous when it's rushed. I clenched my hands around my cup. Tell me about the accident. His eyes flicked toward the window, then back to me. What do you remember? That I lost control. That's the version they gave you. And you. Daniel leaned forward, lowered his voice. I remember your brake lights flaring. I remember you swerving, not randomly but deliberately, like you were avoiding something. What? I whispered. He hesitated again. That familiar, calculated pause. Another car. My pulse spiked. What car? A dark sedan. No plates I could see. He watched my face carefully. It came up fast behind you. Too fast. Why didn't it stop? It did, he said quietly. Just not for long. The cafe noise faded. All I could hear was my own breathing. You're saying he followed me, I said. My husband. I'm saying, Daniel replied, that he knew your route, that he knew you drove alone, that he was desperate. For what? I demanded. For time, Daniel said. For control. I shook my head. Why wouldn't he just leave me? Because, Daniel said gently, leaving would have exposed him. The word hit hard. You, I said. You're the exposure. Yes. Silence stretched between us, heavy and brittle. He was going to tell you, Daniel continued. Eventually. He just needed the right moment. And the accident? My voice cracked. Was that the moment? Daniel's jaw tightened. I don't think he meant for you to get hurt that badly. I stared at him. That's not comforting. I know, he said. But intent matters. No. Isnapat. Outcome matters. Something flashed in his eyes then. Annoyance quickly masked. You asked for the truth. Did you help him? I asked suddenly. The question hung there, sharp and dangerous. Daniel didn't answer right away. No, he said finally. Not the way you're thinking. My stomach dropped. Then what way? I knew he was following you that night, Daniel admitted. He called me, panicking. Said he needed to scare you. Just enough to reset things. Reset? I echoed. My hands were numb. I told him it was a bad idea, Daniel said quickly. I told him to back off. But you still went, I said. You were there. Yes. To stop him? I asked. Daniel met my gaze. Held it. To make sure nothing went wrong. I laughed, a hollow broken sound. And look how well that worked. I pulled you out of the car, he said sharply. I saved your life. Yes, I said. After watching it almost end. People at nearby tables glanced over. Daniel leaned back, composed again. You're focusing on the wrong part, he said. The important thing is that you survived. And now you know. Know what? I asked. That you can't trust him, Daniel said. That the life you thought you had was a performance. And you? I asked softly. What are you to me? His voice dropped. I'm the one who didn't lie to you. The words were so confidently delivered I almost believed them. Almost. Because as he spoke, something clicked into place, a memory I hadn't questioned before. The smell of coins and rain that night. The way he'd been standing so close to the road. Waiting. You said he called you. I said slowly. Before the accident. Yes. So you knew exactly where I'd be, I continued. Exactly when. Daniel didn't respond. You weren't there by chance, I said. You were part of the plan. No, he said firmly. Too firmly. I was a contingency. A backup, I whispered. In case I didn't survive. His silence was answer enough. I stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. I need air. Daniel rose too, reaching for my arm. Don't do this alone. I pulled away. I already have. Outside, the river moved slow and indifferent, sunlight glinting off its surface like nothing in the world was wrong. Behind me, Daniel called my name. For the first time since the accident, I didn't turn around. Because the final, horrifying truth was beginning to form. Not just about what they'd done to me, but about how carefully they'd used my fear, my body, my gratitude, to make sure I'd never see either of them clearly until it was far too late. Knowing doesn't set you free. It cages you with better lighting. After the cafe, I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly until my hands stopped shaking. Until the city thinned out, and the roads began to look like the one where everything had broken. I pulled over eventually, heart hammering, half expecting headlights to appear in my mirror. None did. That scared me more. By the time I returned home, it was dark. My husband was sitting at the kitchen table, phone face down, a glass of water untouched in front of him. He looked up when I entered, relief flashing across his face too quickly to be innocent. "There you are," he said. I was starting to worry. The lie slid out of him smoothly. "Professionally. I met Daniel today," I said, dropping my keys onto the counter. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. His jaw tightened. Just for a second. "Oh," he said. "How is he?" Interesting choice of words. "He told me everything," I replied. Silence stretched between us, taut as wire. I watched his face rearrange itself. Confusion first, then concern, then something colder, more calculating. "I don't know what he thinks he knows," my husband said slowly. "But he's not a safe person." I laughed. "That's funny. He said the same thing about you." He stood up. "You're not well," he said too quickly. "You've been through a trauma. He's manipulating you. Like you did." I asked. That stopped him. I stepped closer, my pulse roaring in my ears. "You followed me that night," I said. "Didn't you?" His eyes flicked toward the hallway. "An exit. A habit." "No," he said. "That's insane." "Then why did you call him?" I demanded. "Why was he there?" His mouth opened. Closed. He ran a hand through his hair. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he said quietly. The words hollowed me out. "You planned it," I whispered. "You planned to scare me. To control me." "I planned to slow you down," he snapped. "You were asking questions. You were noticing things. So you used my body instead," I said. "My fear." "I didn't mean for you to get hurt," he said again, desperate now. Daniel was supposed to keep an eye on things. There it was. Confirmation. Ugly and undeniable. "You used him," I said. His expression twisted. He offered. The room felt too small for the truth. "And after," I continued, "you just let him step in. Let him comfort me. Touch me." "I didn't let him," my husband said bitterly. "He took advantage." I shook my head. "No. You both did." A sound came from the hallway then, soft, deliberate footsteps. My blood ran cold. Daniel appeared in the doorway, jacket still on, eyes sharp and assessing. He hadn't knocked. "I thought you might need support," he said calmly. My husband stared at him. "Get out." Daniel smiled faintly. "You don't get to give orders anymore." "You lied to her," my husband said. "You twisted things." "I clarified them," Daniel replied. "There's a difference." I backed away, my spine hitting the counter. "You planned this," I said to Daniel. "All of it. The rescue. The timing. The way you isolated me." Daniel's gaze softened, practiced and infuriating. I adapted. "You watched me get hurt," I said, my voice breaking. "You waited. And I pulled you out," he said firmly. "I was the one who stayed. Who listened. Who protected you when he froze. You needed me vulnerable," I said. "That's the only version of me you could control." For the first time, Daniel's mask slipped. "Careful," he said. "You don't want to rewrite this as something uglier than it needs to be." My husband laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Hear that? Still threatening." Daniel turned on him. "You don't get to judge methods. And you don't get to play hero," my husband shot back. They stood there, facing each other, two men finally stripped of their performances. I saw them clearly then, not as savior and spouse, but as collaborators arguing over ownership. "I'm not yours," I said aloud. They both turned to me. "I'm not your marriage," I said to my husband. "And I'm not your project," I said to Daniel. Daniel stepped toward me. "You don't have to do this alone." "Yes," I said. "Ido." I grabbed my coat and my phone. My hands were steady now. Cold, but steady. "Don't leave," my husband said, panic bleeding through his voice. "We can fix this." Daniel didn't speak. He just watched me, eyes dark, calculating, as if already planning what came next. At the door, I turned back once. "You both forgot something," I said quietly. "What?" my husband asked. I met Daniel's gaze. I survived. I walked out before either of them could respond. Behind me, the house held its breath. And somewhere in the night, I knew this wasn't over. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because men like them never accept losing control without one final attempt to take everything with them. The ending didn't come with sirens. It came with a knock. 3 days after I left, I was staying in a short-term rental on the edge of the city. Anonymous walls, borrowed furniture, nothing that felt like mine. I'd turned my phone off. I told no one where I was. For the first time since the accident, the silence felt earned. At 11:42 p.m., someone knocked. Not loud. Not urgent. Measured. I didn't answer. I stood in the dark, heart steady, listening. Another knock. Same rhythm. "I know you're awake," Daniel said through the door. Of course it was him. "I just want to talk." I almost laughed. "I'm calling the police," I said. A pause. Then calmly, "About what?" I pictured him on the other side. Hands relaxed, expression reasonable. A man who understood optics better than truth. "You won't," he continued. "Because you already know how this looks. A traumatized woman. Conflicting stories. No witnesses." He exhaled softly. "And because if you open that door, I can finally stop lying to you." That was the hook. The last one. Against every instinct screaming at me not to, I opened the door, but I stayed behind the chain. Daniel stood there alone. No smile this time. No softness. "I came to finish it," he said. "Finish what?" I asked. "The story," he replied. "You deserve the whole thing." I said nothing. He glanced down the hallway, then back at me. "Your husband isn't coming," he said. "He panicked after you left. Started making calls. Asking the wrong questions." "What did you do?" I asked. "I told him to calm down," Daniel said. He didn't listen. My chest tightened. "Where is he?" Daniel's eyes held mine. "He's safe. For now." The words were careful. Lawyered. "You staged it," I said. Not a question. "Yes." The word landed cleanly. "No epaleji. No hesitation." The speed. The angle. The timing. "We rehearsed it on paper," he continued, voice almost academic. "The goal was fear, not damage. You were supposed to walk away shaken. Dependent. Reset." "And if I'd died?" I asked. Daniel swallowed. For the first time, something like unease flickered across his face. "That wasn't the plan," he said. "But it was a possibility." "Yes." I let that sit between us. "He loved you," Daniel added, quieter now. "In his way. But love like that rots when it's exposed." "And you?" I asked. "What was this to you?" Daniel leaned closer to the door, lowering his voice. "You were never supposed to be collateral," he said. "You were supposed to be the solution. By breaking me. By rebuilding you," he corrected. "With the truth." I stared at him. "You didn't want me strong," I said. "You wanted me alone." He didn't deny it. "People are most honest when they've lost everything else," he said. Something inside me finally went still. "You miscalculated," I said. Daniel frowned. "How?" "You thought surviving made me malleable," I said. "You didn't realize it made me angry." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Turned it on. Held it up so he could see the screen. Recording. His face drained of color. "I remembered more than you thought," I said calmly. "Voices. Words. Your name. I started recording weeks ago." "You can't prove." "I don't need to," I interrupted. "I just need to tell it." He stared at the phone like it was a weapon. "You won't be believed," he said. "Maybe not at first," I agreed. "But here's the thing about staged accidents." I smiled for the first time since the crash. "They only work once." Daniel stepped back slowly, calculation returning, but too late. "Goodbye," I said and closed the door. This time, the silence that followed wasn't pressing. It was expansive. In the weeks that followed, the story unraveled exactly the way lies always do. Out of sequence, in fragments, with too many hands trying to control it. My husband confessed first. He couldn't live with the uncertainty. With not knowing what Daniel would do next. Daniel never contacted me again. I heard he left the city. That he always does. Sometimes I still dream of the road, of headlights and spinning glass. But now when I wake up, my hands are steady, because the most devastating thing I took from them wasn't evidence or revenge or closure. It was authorship. They tried to use my body to tell their story. Instead, I lived long enough to finish it myself.